Montana Territory, September 1881. The wheels of the stagecoach jostled over the uneven trail as the town of Red Elk came into view, dust rising behind like a warning. Leora Fairlight gripped the edge of the bench with white knuckles, her wide-brimmed bonnet askew from the long ride. Her gloves were stained from sweat and dirt, her corset pinching tighter than usual. She had never seen the West before, and now it felt like it was swallowing her whole. The stagecoach lurched once more before halting outside the tiny depot. Leora stepped down carefully, skirts bunched in one hand, carpetbag in the other. Her boots touched loose cobblestone and her ankle turned. She stumbled forward, a strong arm caught her before she hit the ground. "I got you," a deep voice said. She looked up into the face of a tall man with dark, sun-browned skin, a square jaw dusted with stubble and eyes the color of storm clouds. He steadied her with both hands, not letting go until she found her footing. "Thank you," she said, breathless. "You must be the bride," he said. "Mail order right, Leora Fairlight?" She blinked. "Yes, how did you—" "Name's Quentin Ashford," he said, tipping his hat. "Your groom never came to meet you. I reckon he changed his mind." Leora's stomach dropped. She looked around. People passed her by, ranchers, townsfolk, a boy chasing a hound, but no one looked like they were waiting for her. Her letter had said the man's name was Charles. He had written that he owned a general store and had 2 children. He had promised her a family. Quentin watched her face pale. "You did not know," he said quietly. "He left town last week, took his kids and wagon and headed south. No one's heard from him since." Leora stood very still. Her fingers loosened on the handle of her bag and it dropped to the ground with a soft thud. "I sold everything," she whispered. "I have nothing left in Boston, no family, no home." Quentin bent down, picked up her bag, and stood beside her in silence for a moment. "Well," he said softly, "you are not going to stand here alone until the sun goes down. Come on. My ranch is just outside town. You can rest there tonight." "No one gets left behind in Red Elk." She hesitated. "You do not even know me," he smiled, but it was gentle, not mocking. "You stumbled, I steadied you. That has to count for something." Quentin's ranch sat 5 miles from town. The ride out was quiet. She sat beside him in the buckboard wagon, her hands folded in her lap, her heart still thudding like a rabbit's. He did not press her with questions. Just pointed out a few landmarks: the creek, the rocky ridge, the spot where elk sometimes grazed in the early morning. The ranch was modest, a 2-room cabin, a barn, and a corral with 3 horses. Chickens pecked near the porch, and a dog barked once before curling back up in the shade. Inside, the cabin smelled like cedar and coffee. Clean. Leora's shoulders relaxed an inch. "You can have the bed," Quentin said. "I will sleep out on the porch." "I cannot." "You can," he said simply. "I will bring your bag in." Leora stood in the doorway as he walked back out. Her fingers touched the stitches of the quilt on the bed, the worn wood of the table, the tin cup on the shelf. It felt real, safe. That evening, Quentin made stew and cornbread. They ate in silence, the sun sinking low behind the pines. Leora watched him move with quiet purpose, feeding the horses, closing the coop, lighting the lamp. He was not a man of many words, but she did not feel loneliness beside him. She felt steadied. After supper, she stood outside near the steps while he leaned against the post, arms crossed. "I came here to marry a man I never met," she said. "I thought I was being brave." "You were," Quentin said. "I feel foolish." "You are not." She looked over at him. "Why did you help me?" He held her gaze. "Because you deserved better than being left in the dirt by someone who made a promise." The last light of the sun touched her face, and her eyes filled with tears. She blinked them away. "I will find work," she said. "I will not be a burden." "You are not a burden." His voice was low. "But if you want work, I could use help here. Someone to manage things while I am out in the fields. You would hire me. I would offer you a place until you find what you are looking for." Leora exhaled slowly. She had not found a husband, but she had found a man who saw her. "I was looking for a home," she said. "Maybe it is not always where you expect it to be." Quentin's eyes softened. He nodded once. The sun dipped behind the hills. The sky turned gold and purple. And beside that quiet man who had caught her before she fell, Leora felt the first flicker of something she had not dared hope for again, something that felt a lot like belonging. The wind came down from the hills in long, dry breaths the next morning, stirring the grasses and carrying the scent of sage across the pasture. Inside the cabin, Leora stood barefoot on the plank floor, sleeves rolled to her elbows as she scrubbed the basin. The warmth of the water had gone, but she didn't mind. Her hands had known harder work in Boston's mills. Quentin stepped in from the barn, dust on his trousers and a coil of rope slung over one shoulder. He paused at the door, his boots leaving faint prints in the swept dirt. "You always work before breakfast?" he asked. "I find it steadies me," she said, not turning, "and I didn't want to leave your dishes for you." He set the rope on a hook and crossed to the hearth. "There's oats on the shelf. If you'll boil water, I'll slice the apples." She nodded, wiped her hands, and moved to the stovepipe kettle without a word. The rhythm of movement between them was quiet, unspoken, but not unfamiliar. It reminded her of watching her mother work beside her father in the garden, two people who didn't need to talk to understand where the other stood. As they ate, Quentin broke open the silence again. "There's a widow in town," he said. "Mrs. Harlan. She keeps a boarding house and takes in mending. She's always saying she needs help with the wash and her hens." Leora looked up from her tin bowl. "You're offering me a job, I'm offering you choices," he said. "You don't owe me your days." Her spoon scraped the bottom of the bowl. "You don't talk like most men." Quentin shrugged. "I've lived enough years to know folks do better when they aren't cornered." She watched him for a long moment. "And what do you do with your days, Quentin?" "I run cattle, mostly. The land's too dry for wheat most years, so I trade hides and raise colts when I can." He leaned back in his chair. "There's a spring-fed trough past the ridge. I'll be taking the chestnut mare out that way this afternoon. If you've a mind to ride, I've got a gentler horse too." She hesitated. "It's been years. I only ever rode in town, never past a garden gate." He smiled faintly. "You won't be near a gate today, but I'll keep you close." The mare he led out for her was a dun with a white blaze and calm eyes. Leora laid her palm to its shoulder, waiting for the animal to shiver or pull away. It didn't. "I called her Hazel," Quentin said, tightening the cinch. "She listens better than most men and doesn't startle easy." Leora mounted with a bit of awkwardness, but her balance found her by the time they reached the ridge. The trail opened into a broad stretch of grass bordered by cottonwoods, their leaves just beginning to turn at the edges. The sky stretched like blue canvas above them, and ahead, the trough shimmered like a mirror tucked into the earth. Quentin rode just ahead, glancing back now and then. When they reached the water, he dismounted first and helped her down, his hands firm but gentle at her waist. She looked out over the field, the silence between them broken only by the soft clip of horses drinking. "Back in Boston," she said slowly, "I used to imagine quiet like this, only I thought it would feel lonely." "Does it?" he asked. She shook her head. "It feels like breathing after holding it too long." The breeze caught the edge of her skirt and she pressed it down with one hand. Quentin crouched to check the mare's front hoof, brushing away a stone. "What brought you to Montana?" she asked. "My uncle left me this land. I was working cattle in Wyoming before that. Figured if I was going to break my back over dirt, it might as well be mine." "And you never married?" He looked up, the brim of his hat shadowing his eyes. "Came close once. She didn't want the prairie life." "I didn't want to leave it." Leora folded her hands. "I thought I'd be someone's wife by now, thought that would solve everything." "It doesn't," he said. "No," she agreed, "but I think I was hoping it might start something." He stood and dusted off his knees. "Sometimes the start looks nothing like you pictured." They didn't speak for a while after that. Hazel nickered softly and the wind stirred the long grass. Leora turned her face to the sun, eyes closed as if she could drink the warmth into her bones. When they rode back, she didn't need help mounting. Quentin noticed but said nothing. That night, she sat on the porch with a candle lantern between them. He worked a bit of leather between his fingers, repairing a bridle strap. She stitched the edge of a torn petticoat with even hands, the needle flashing in the low light. "Tomorrow," she said, "I think I'll speak with Mrs. Harlan, but I'd like to help here too if there's work needing hands." "There is," he said. "Always?" She nodded, and the silence sat easy between them again. The stars came out one by one, and the night settled around the cabin like a worn quilt. Neither of them said it, but something between them had shifted, quiet as the turning of a page, sure as the horses resting in the dark. The dust had barely settled on the front path when Leora stepped through the narrow gate of Mrs. Harlan's place, her gloves tucked under one arm and her skirts catching on the dry grass. The boarding house stood 2 streets off the main road, shaded by a leaning elm and lined with mismatched windows patched with muslin curtains. A wood smoke smell clung to the porch. Mrs. Harlan herself answered the door with a flower-covered apron and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She looked Leora up and down once before stepping aside. "You're the one who was left standing," she said, voice flat but not unkind. "I am," Leora said, steady. Mrs. Harlan nodded, wiping her hands on her apron. "Well, I don't turn away women who show up clear-eyed and with calluses." "Can you wring out linens without whining?" "Yes." "Can you tell a rooster from a pullet?" "I can learn." That earned a grunt, and the woman motioned her inside. By noon, Leora had her sleeves rolled, her hands red from lye soap, and a hen pecked welt on her wrist. She didn't speak much, but her back stayed straight and her pace never slowed. By late afternoon, she walked the road back to the ranch, arms stiff, hair messy from the wind. Quentin was out by the fence line, hammering new rails into place. He turned when he heard the gate. "How was she?" he asked, setting down the mallet. "Efficient," Leora said, "and suspicious of anyone who doesn't know the difference between gooseberries and poison sumac." Quentin chuckled low in his throat. "Sounds about right. I'm going back tomorrow." He nodded once, then bent to check the alignment of the post. Leora stepped beside him, watching his hands measure by sight and habit. "Do you need help here too?" she asked. "I've never built a fence, but I can hold a rail." He handed her a post without answering. She took it and pressed one boot into the earth as he guided the wood into place. The silence between them wasn't heavy, it moved, breathed. By dusk, they had finished 3 lengths of fence. Quentin set down his hammer and leaned on the top rail, his sleeves rolled and his collar damp with sweat. "You don't mind the work?" he asked. "No," she said. "I mind not being useful." He wiped his brow with his wrist. "You're plenty useful." She glanced toward the hills where the light was falling in long slants through the trees. "I used to think I'd end up in some parlor trying to keep my voice soft and my shoes clean. Would that have pleased you?" "I think I wanted to please someone else," she said. "Now I just want to be where my hands mean something." Quentin looked at her then, long and quiet. "You're not made for glass cases, Leora," she met his eyes. "You don't act like I'm broken. You're not." She looked down, fingers brushing the rough grain of the fence rail. "I used to think being left meant something was wrong with me. It meant something was wrong with him." She didn't answer right away. The quiet folded around them, not sharp, not cold, just still. "I've never had someone look out for me without expecting something in return," she said. "I don't expect anything," he said, "but I'd like the chance to keep looking out for you." Her gaze didn't waver. "I'd like that too." The sun was nearly gone now, the last edge of it gilding her hair. Quentin's hand rested on the fence between them, rough and scarred from years of work. After a moment, she laid hers beside it, not touching, just near. Neither moved. The sky darkened, and the first stars began to show. Inside the cabin, the lamp still waited unlit. But outside, under that endless sky, something steady and quiet was being built, stronger than wood, deeper than words. And neither of them needed to say it aloud to know it was real. By mid-October, the mornings came rimmed in frost. The air bit through cloth and skin alike, and the fields held a hush that made every sound, horse hooves, kettle whistle, even breath, feel louder. On the ranch, the days shortened, but work didn't. Leora learned to split kindling and muck stalls, her hands steady now with the weight of tools instead of lace. She no longer asked what to do. She simply did. That morning, Quentin returned from the northern grazing stretch just after sunrise, his coat stiff with cold and his jaw set tighter than usual. Leora met him near the barn, her shawl drawn close and the dog trailing behind her. "There's a break in the fence up near the ravine," he said. "Tracks show something moved through in the night, could be wolves." She nodded, brushing hay from her skirt. "Do you want me to check the coop?" "They'd go for deer first," he said. "But yes, and keep the lantern lit near the door tonight," she hesitated. "Are you riding back out?" "I have to." "Those cattle won't hold if the fence doesn't." "I'll pack you a sack," she said, already turning. He caught her wrist not hard, just enough to pause her. "You've been carrying more than your share." "I'm not made of glass," she said. "I know." "That's why I notice." She didn't answer, but her hand lingered a moment before pulling away. Inside, she wrapped bread and dried meat, adding a square of molasses cake she'd made the night before. She tucked it into his saddlebag without mentioning it. By the time Quentin rode out, the sun had cleared the ridge. Leora watched him disappear along the tree line, the horse's legs kicking up pale dust in long, slow strides. The day passed with small, necessary things: grinding corn, boiling linens, checking the root cellar for spoilage. At midday, Mrs. Harlan sent word through a passing trader that she'd be needing help with her niece's confinement in November. Leora sent a reply on a scrap of paper, folded once and pressed into the man's coat pocket. Evening came with a wind that rattled the eaves. The dog barked twice and fell quiet. Leora lit the porch lantern and set a pot of barley stew on the stove. She kept glancing at the door between stirring and setting the table, though she didn't admit to herself why. When Quentin finally returned, it was full dark. His coat was torn at the shoulder and there was blood at the edge of his collar, brown and dried. Leora stepped back from the stove as he entered. "What happened?" "Got too close to a snagged wire. The colt reared, nothing deep." She crossed to him, fingers reaching for his coat. "Sit," she said. "I'll clean it." He didn't argue, just eased into the chair by the hearth while she fetched the basin. She worked quietly, dabbing warm water along the torn skin. His jaw tightened, but he didn't flinch. "You should have stitched this earlier," she said. Didn't want to stop. "Fence needed mending. You think you're the only one who can mend things." He looked up then, his voice low. "No, but I've had enough left behind to know not everything stays fixed." Her fingers paused at the wound. The fire cracked behind them. "I'm not going anywhere, Quentin," she said. "You didn't ask for me and I didn't expect to find you, but I won't vanish in the night." He turned his hand over and rested it against her hip, barely touching. "I know that now," he said. She met his gaze, steady as the first time he'd caught her on the depot road. "I didn't believe in second chances," she said. "Not truly. I thought I'd take what I could get and make do." "You don't have to make do." "I know," she said. The stew cooled on the stove, forgotten. The basin sat untouched on the floor. Her fingers still held the cloth, but neither of them moved to finish what had been started. "You've built something here," she said. "Not just fences and barns, something honest." "I'd share it," he said, "if you wanted it." She folded the cloth and set it aside. "I do." He stood slowly, the lamplight drawing shadows across his face. "Then stay." Leora stepped into him, her forehead resting beneath his chin. "I already have," she said. Outside, the wind quieted, the grass hushed. And in the stillness of that one small room, two people who had not been looking for each other found what neither had dared name: a place to belong. A home not built with walls, but with hands extended and caught. Snow came early that year, blanketing the hills by the second week of November. It didn't fall heavy, not yet, but the ground stayed white through morning, and the air carried a stillness that made every footstep sound louder than it should. Leora stood just outside the barn at sunrise, arms crossed over her wool shawl, watching her breath curl into the cold. Inside, Quentin was saddling the colt. He'd taken to checking the fence lines before sunup now, not trusting the weight of the snow to hold the posts. When she stepped into the barn, he glanced up and nodded once. "I'll ride north and circle back past the ridge," he said. "Shouldn't take more than a few hours." She reached for the bridle hanging on the peg beside him. "I'll come with you," his brow lifted. "You sure?" "I've spent enough mornings by the stove," she said, tightening the strap. "I'd rather ride beside you," he didn't argue. They rode out just after first light, the horses' hooves muffled by the powder. The land looked different under snow gentler, somehow, though the cold bit through even the thickest coat. They didn't speak much, but the quiet between them no longer felt like something that needed filling. Near the ridge, they dismounted. One of the rails had bowed under the weight of a fallen branch. Quentin lifted it without comment, and Leora steadied the post while he wedged a new length of wood into place. Her fingers had grown more sure since the first time. He didn't have to watch her hands now. As he hammered the last nail, she looked out over the tree line. "Has it always felt this far from everything?" He paused. "Depends what you mean. Boston was always noise and elbows." "I thought I'd miss it more." "You don't," she shook her head. "I thought I would, but I don't miss the ache of being invisible." He set the hammer down. "You're not invisible here." She met his eyes. "No, I know that now." They rode back as the clouds thickened, the sky pressing low. Inside the cabin, the warmth of the fire met them like an embrace. While Quentin stripped off his coat near the hearth, Leora reached into the cupboard for the tin of flour. She began mixing dough without needing a recipe, her hands moving with quiet certainty. He leaned against the table watching her. "You ever think about what you want next?" he asked. She didn't look up. "I used to make lists, long ones, mostly filled with things I was meant to want. And now," she folded the dough, her voice calm, "now I think about mornings like this. Riding out, coming back, having a place where someone waits for me." He nodded slowly. "I built this place with the idea it would be enough for one man, but it never felt full till now." She slid the dough into the pan. "Are you saying this house needs more boots by the door?" "I'm saying it's better with yours." She dusted her hands and turned to face him. "You've never asked me for anything." "I didn't want to ask until I knew you wanted to stay." "I do." He stepped forward, close enough that she could see the flecks of gray starting in his beard, the lines that deepened beside his eyes when he looked at her this way. "I don't need a big word said over us," he said. "But I want to stand beside you in every season that comes. I want you in this house, not just passing through." She touched his chest, where the fabric of his shirt was warm from the fire. "Then let's make a life here, not the one we were promised. The one we choose." He bent his head, kissing her slow, the kind of kiss that felt like thaw after a long freeze. She didn't pull away. The following week, they traded 2 hides and a sack of barley for a ring from the blacksmith's wife, a simple band, worn smooth by years but still strong. They exchanged vows in the parlor of the church with only the preacher and Mrs. Harlan there to witness. No fanfare, just 2 people, hands joined, eyes steady. The house changed after that in little ways. A second rocking chair appeared on the porch. Her stitching basket rested beside his sharpening stone. He built a shelf for her books above the hearth. She planted bulbs in the window box despite the frost. That spring, the hens laid better than ever, and Mrs. Harlan's niece named her child after Leora. Quentin repaired the barn roof in May, and by midsummer, the pasture fence held through 2 storms. On warm evenings, they sat on the porch without speaking, the quiet between them full of knowing, full of peace. Years passed. The grass grew tall and golden. They added a room to the cabin, then another. A cradle stood in the corner come the second winter, hand carved by Quentin's own hands, and Leora sang softly to the child long after she'd fallen asleep. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the shadows stretched long across the field, Quentin took Leora's hand in his, rough fingers lacing with hers. "I never thought life would bring me this," he said. She smiled, her cheek resting against his shoulder. "Neither did I. But I'm glad it did." And so they stayed through storms and seasons, through long days and slow dawns, not just surviving, living together home at last.